You're listening to Dirty Feet, a dance podcast. I'm Allison Burns. On this episode of the Dirty Feet podcast, I am joined by Marie-Josée Chartier, who is presenting work and including a new creation, a solo that she's performing herself here at the Ottawa Dance Directive this week. I'm so glad to be speaking with you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, Marie-Josée, you have a rich choreographic history. You are an award-winning choreographer. You also work in different disciplines. You have, including opera, which is fun. That's one that we don't see very often on this podcast. And theater and music and visual arts. And I'm just very pleased to even just touch the tip of the iceberg of all of those things today. Let's speak about the start briefly, if we can, about what got you. I think the appropriate question is into the arts in general rather than dance specifically, because you are so multifaceted.
It was a little bit of an accident. I was doing a degree in preschool education, and part of me, I just started to try dance. I was already a teenager. I was interested in voice. I was interested in theater. I liked everything, but I wasn't, this is what I want to do. I wasn't very clear. But it all came into a small ad in a tabloid paper of this new school opening in Old Montreal called Pointe-Pieds Nus. And the director was from the Moudra School of Béjar in Brussels. And the ad just said, theater, rhythm, dance, and I thought, this is where I'm going to go, not knowing anything about the school, the directors, and not really having anyone in my family to guide me into, where to go. So I just thought, that's what I want to do. And I just, registered, and I was the first student actually at the school. And we studied voice as much as we studied dance, and we had ballet and different types of modern techniques and rhythm and yoga, physical theater, contemporary music appreciation. So it was pretty fantastic kind of diving in all these disciplines. And really, it's only recently, maybe in the last not even 10 years, that I realized, wow, this has had a much bigger influence than I thought it would, because right away I focused mostly on dance, and I was part of the company as a dancer. But as soon as I started making my first pieces, there was a huge visual art element, design element, music element. So it was kind of a natural thing that I was, attracted to. And one of my first pieces, I worked with a really incredible visual artist and composer, and right away that, it's kind of happened.
You established your company, Chartier Danse, in 2003. And of course, the company is designed to allow you to produce your work.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more specifically what the mandate of the company is, what an outside observer might see?
The mandate is pretty simple. Really, it's to support my creative activities, my creative ideas. Chartier Danse is a name that I use when I mostly engage in really large collaborations, either nationally or internationally, when there are big projects that that would bring a lot of partners. And the mandate of Chartier Danse and the mandate of myself, really, because Chartier Danse is me. I don't have any co-artistic director. I make all the decisions. I'm very interested to have a full integration of all elements. So I bring all the players right from the beginning. So there's the lighting designers, costume designers, set designers. A lot of time I, kind of design the sets badly on paper, but I work with really great builders. For me, that's all part of the beginning of the seed of the work. So basically, Chartier Danse, for me, it's all these elements that I am interested in. And it varies. There's projects that are very small scale and projects that are very large scale, where it's international and lots of co-productions. or lots of people, or it could be a solo that has a big production value. So it totally varies, and the themes vary, and so I think to me that's what's important is the integration of forms. One of the things that's important.
I feel like scale is a theme, at least for my line of questioning today. So let's start with scale in terms of the length of your career. So looking back on some of your past works, you have big groups, you have props, you have multi-disciplines involved, big costumes, big lights, big sound. Can we talk about what your experience has been navigating kind of in between those big scale things and then doing something like a self-performed solo that you're going to be doing this week that is much different in scale, and how you determine when to do which project? Is it all based on what resources you have available to you, or is it the vision?
It's a good question because I think usually the ideas that I want to explore, when the ideas come to me, a lot of time come to me from a visual art kind of source. And just for the record, I've never studied visual art. I'm not really interested in doing visual art. I don't draw. I don't do pottery. It's just something that really attracts me, contemporary visual art. And from visiting galleries, and it's been an ongoing source of inspiration, if that's the right word, like triggering really big images. So when I think of a work, I usually think of it first in visual ways. The space, the lighting, the set, if there's a set. Even the dancers, they're more in the space. I don't think of it so much choreographically. Sometimes the music's there right away in terms of I know maybe with which composer I want to work with because I'm looking after something specific. Sometimes there's an already existing music. Sometimes I need a sound designer because I want to bring in a lot of my vocal work into it and words. So to try to go back to your question, what happens is what is the seed of the idea that I get? And then from there, what do I need to achieve it? So, for example, I've mostly done large work that are an hour or 90 minutes long with one big thematic idea that gets developed. And then if we arrive to Petite Danse, which was a huge shift for me, it's dances that are 10, 12 minutes long. Then the best comparison I can give is I go from being a novelist to a short story writer, which is a huge challenge in itself.
Wrap it up quick.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like every detail, I think every detail is always important, but every detail in a 10-minute work where the idea might be big, is for me, it's been really challenging. And some of the, I've done a series of Petite Danse so far, probably up to 18 of them. And some of them I'm like, oh, no, this is a 1 hour piece. When I look at how
it's just bursting at the seams.
Yeah, and it's the type, one of them is, one of the dances, a septet, is more like it has an installation feeling to it. It works in 8 minutes. It has its own impact, but I can also see that evolving in a gallery with 25 people doing it over an hour, for example.
Can you tell us about the inspiration for Petite Danse? It was a proposal, was it not?
Yes. So what happened is in 2013, I received an award from Soul Pepper, which is a theater company, and they had dance awards. And I received a residency award for my work, and it gave me 2 weeks in the theater or 2 weeks in the studio. And so I took 1 week in the studio by myself, and just having access 24/7 to a studio is just already... because I'm usually not somebody who likes to be in the studio that much. I prefer to think about things when I'm traveling or on the bus, on the train. But I don't have a huge desire to be in a studio because for me, once I'm in the studio, means that I'm addressing the movement, the choreography, which is still to me the toughest part. So I had a whole week, and just time and space has a huge impact on how we think. I mean, space, public spaces, theaters, different theaters, we feel better in some of them. Studios, we feel better. And just having this space that I could come and go as I wished, it made a huge difference. And at that time, I really was not in a creative space that much. So I just went. And then on the third day, I was looking at old videos, and I brought some music of my favorite Canadian composers who are contemporary music composers, and listening to some of those pieces that are, 9-10 minutes long. And then suddenly I was having many different ideas to the same piece of music. And around that same time, I was at a concert of Linda Smith and the Evergreen Gamelan, which is the music I'm using this week, actually. And while it was playing live, I had 3 or 4 different strong choreographic ideas that were just kind of flooding me, which took me by surprise because I was not in that kind of creative space at the time. So all this put together, I went like, oh, what if I use, for example, John Sherlock's 4-minute necklace piece, and then I had a series of short films on it, and then I had a dance, and Linda Smith's piece in the high branches, which is what you're going to hear this week. I also created 4 different choreographies to it. And it happens in the same evening, and this, I'm going on right now to the bigger petite danse that I created after, is that how do we actually see the music, and how do we hear the dance? How do we see the music because of what happens on stage, visually, physically, how it shifts the music around. So with one piece of music that I know really well, I may accent when the string comes in or when the gamelan, rumbles. And the next choreography, I may not focus on that. So already the music sounds drastically different. So it does a very strange thing on your perception and on probably your nervous system, how through the eyes we take in so much information. I mean, it'd be a great thesis for a neurologist to see what actually happens and with their sense of hearing. So after that Soul Pepper, I did a small informal show, and I had 10 short dances. I had over 25 performers involved, but it all had a very informal feeling to it. And then I got a substantial grant to explore it over almost 3 years. And then I decided to do 8 pieces from solo to octet, solo, duo, trio, quartet. I gave myself a very strict structure because I thought there's too much choice. And I chose 4 pieces of music. So in the first half of the program, you hear each piece of music once with 1 dance. After intermission, you hear the same music again with 4 different dances. And that people don't even notice it's the same music. Even if they read it in a program, I tell them. It's just a curiosity thing, right? It's not that important, but a lot of audience members have told me that they know maybe the same music coming back, but there's a sense of familiarity when they see the piece. They might not notice right away it's the music they heard before, but they're already in a known land, in a known landscape. So for Ottawa, I decided to go back to one of those pieces and make a musical pairing, a jumelage. And to that, I have 4 men. And to the same music by Linda Smith, I'm doing a solo.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for bringing it back around. So
it's a long story.
No, it's such a fascinating one. So Diptych, which you're presenting at the Ottawa Dance Directive, is going to feature a study for solo and a study for quartet, as you were saying. So this brings me to another question of scale, especially when we're talking about how, when you're deciding what you're putting in the space, you're deciding these are 2 different propositions, the bodies of 4 men and the bodies of 1 woman. And also whenever you go from a solo dance to more than 1 person on stage, the whole game has changed already. Yeah. So tell us how that has changed from your perspective. Because I have my answer, but I would like to know your answer.
What is change, you mean
from a solo to any other size group?
Well, I think in this case, I'm so familiar with that piece of music because I've done so many works to it that moving into a solo felt quite natural, only because there's been so many elements working on the quartet. I have one for 14 dancers to that piece of music. I have one for 2 dancers. It's kind of all informing me. And so I think what happens is in this program, you'll see the quartet first, and then it goes into the solo. There are some elements that are similar, just some breathing elements in the music, but besides that, I think they each have their own complete narrative, not linear, but definitely there's definitely a lot of narratives going on. and again, I try to keep them fairly open, but some of them, especially in the men's quartet, because of the interaction of the 4 men and the space and what we're doing with the lighting here, it has a very specific location. You'll have a sense of where they are. And then when that shifts psychologically, where they drop into another world and when they come back to the world that they're in. And then, interestingly enough, because my solo is really brand new and we're exploring, I was talking about space, how you really have to think about the space that you work in. I knew I was doing this at the Odd Box. So when I was in the studio, I was really thinking about that space here, right? Mm-hmm. Of course, if it goes on tour, then, it's a whole other ballgame. But because now this is where we're going to be, I was really thinking about that space, the depth of it. So, for me, at the beginning, I'm really far away from the audience, and that is important. And then the lighting that we started working on today, and yesterday a little bit, is informing a whole other narrative right now. Because there's new possibility that's informing even how I'm approaching the dance. Because those elements are important to me. They're not important to all choreographers, but to me they're so strong.
To get specific, when you pare down to a single dancer, you eliminate relationships. Is there anything that needs to be done to account for that when you're choreographing for one dancer?
I think my relationship is really with the space, with the space and with myself, actually. So I think that there's lots going on already.
There's nothing lacking in that scenario.
Well, it's we spend a lot of time alone. I have a lot of friends, but I spend a lot of time alone, which might surprise people that know me, because I love to.
Because they see you when you're not alone.
Yeah, and I have more of a social kind of way of being, loving to be with people. But when I love to travel, and I travel alone most of the time. Even if it's for work, I take for myself. I will just go to countries I don't know, and I'm by myself. And I do a lot of walking alone, and I go places without knowing exactly where I'm going. So I'm quite adventurous. And I think it's interesting you're asking me this question, because I realized that this solo and Stria that I presented in Ottawa, which is a 1-hour solo, was inspired, was autobiographical, and then beyond that, but has that feeling of aloneness,
So it's relevant that it's a solo. It's not.
Yeah, aloneness, and also discovering things while I'm alone in the space. So hopefully it will open up the audience's imagination with what's happening with me on stage. Hopefully. That's what we hope for. To give images that are open enough, but that there's a real kind of a dramatic line that's woven through the whole piece. The same with the Quartet of Men. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but
I'm not sure what I'm looking for. This is great.
And it's an interesting question, because I feel alone, and I don't feel so alone either. There's lots going on, right? Because there's also an audience there. Mm-hmm. And there's the lighting, and there's the music, and there's the space, and there's myself. How am I with myself? It shifts. It's not set. I mean, it's set enough, but every time I do it, I'm in the moment, and what happens at that moment that I'm doing it in performance and even in rehearsals. We just did it now, and I discovered a new thing, and I say, okay, maybe I'll stay longer in this idea. This feels better to do it that way.
Can you introduce us to the four interprets who are dancing your quartet?
Yes. Dan Wild, who's known to contemporary dance. He's danced in Winnipeg Contemporary Dancers. He's danced with dance makers. He has danced with Susie Burpee and Claudia Moore, and a lot for me. And he's really helping me with the solo right now. So that's really great. And Leary McNichols, who I used to dance with a long time ago, briefly at Dance Makers, and who's had also a career with Toronto Dance Theatre and in Vancouver, and has moved away from Toronto, not that far, to Hamilton. I hadn't seen him in a really long time, and I've wanted to reconnect. So it's really great that he's dancing with us. Miko Sobrera, who's got has danced a lot for Claudia Moore, is a salsa master, has done a lot of theater, and he did the original quartet with me and does a lot of work. I mean, right now I'm sure I'm trying to do a very quick bio of everybody, but I'm sure I'm missing a lot. But and Daryl Tracy, who has danced with Heidi Strauss. They've had this company, Four Chambers Dance Projects, has been part of my work quite a bit, and Daryl has done a lot of his own work as well, and is a really well-known teacher in Canada and a fantastic physiotherapist as well. So this is just a small overview of what all these incredible men, their careers and what they bring to the work too. They're all very mature, so it's really wonderful to go in the studio with some ideas that they have to get inside, and it's a real exchange. It's a real collaboration with the performers. Like some of the ideas, I throw it out there, and then we improvise on them, and then we start shaping them, and they really bring their own personality to the work, and because that's what interests me, the personality of the performer.
There's a ton of video available of your work on the internet. and surfing through some of it, you cast humans. There's some dancers that look like dancers, but there's also dancers that look like humans in your work.
Hopefully my dancers always look like human, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
So did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, again, I think it goes back to how much I struggle. It's not struggling, but with movement and choreography, because every time I approach a choreography, it's always like, oh, it's too much like dance. It's too much like what I know. It's too much. And so I'm always trying to find the movement that will be the closest to what really I'm trying to say or to do, to communicate. So I think the aspect that even when I work with highly, highly trained dancers, I'm really interested to see the real strong, deep, vulnerable human side of that dancer. And I catch myself not so much with these very experienced dancers that I usually work with, but from time to time I work with less experienced dancers, like recent graduates, or and I catch myself often saying, okay, now I really want you to forget you're a dancer. I just forget that you're a dancer, because sometimes they want to do really well and they want to make sure they do the right thing, and which is great. But I say, I want to see you. And for younger performers and younger dancers, because of the way the discipline is, it's like, okay, because often in the training, we're not asked so much to be ourselves. I mean, we do have to learn a lot of the technical aspects, and I'm very, I really believe in that as well. But I think I'm more interested to see and I've worked also with non-professional dancers. I just did a show last week with Old Men Dancing, which is a group from Peterborough, and they're all men who don't come from a dance background at all. And the average age now is 64 years old. So I was, I was helping them with a show, 13 men from 53 to 70 years old, and very demanding, actually, kind of work they were doing. And so that's interesting too, because the non-dancerly, habits or mannerisms, or I don't even really want to say that too much, because I think the performers I work with are so amazing, and they really bring themselves, and the technicalities they have is almost is a consequence, is not the main thing that you see. But with these men, it's they're they have themselves to offer, and then what we work on is more precision, working on the spacing, and sometimes in just clarifying things that in performance are a little bit different than in everyday life. So, and then there's everything else in between that, different projects bring me with different types of performers with different types of experiences.
Awesome.
Sure keeps me, you can't fall on habits. I constantly have to figure out how to work, how to direct. Mm-hmm. Or like when I work a lot with opera singers, right? That's a whole other way of approaching the movement.
That's great. That's actually where I wanted to go next, was into opera, because when you get into singing, you are doing something physical. And I don't have experience with singing and with opera, but I'm wondering if you found your dance background to be advantageous when you're singing, when you're performing, when you're doing opera.
Yeah, well, I've worked a lot with opera singers who do classical roles and also do contemporary music and also do Baroque. But myself, when I started dancing, voice studies was part of our training. And then I was part of a fantastic collective for 15 years called Urge. And in Urge, you have Fides Kruker, who was an opera singer at the time, still sings and teaches a lot. And Linda Smith is a composer, and Catherine Duncanson's a performance artist. And we had many members join us for different productions. And there's been a huge background in extended vocal technique, where we approach the sound as the sound of what the voice can make. So there's that also has a particular training, but it's that whole gamut, array of how to approach the voice. So of course, when I'm working with my colleagues in that world, is a particular way of approaching the work. When I've since 2000, I've been working a lot with opera singers. Some of them are naturally, like you say, the voice is the body, but I think a lot of the repertoire, and often the way that the voice, classical voice, can be taught, the body is not as involved, and they are on stage, but often through the training. So, and I'm always careful what I'm saying right now, because I don't want it to seem like it's just part of the discipline. So once these singers get into doing roles, again, it depends. If they're doing a very, very classically staged opera, there will be movement, but it'll be more like blocking on stage, but they may not do anything extravagant. But if you have the same classical opera staged by a very contemporary director, well, I've seen that these singers roll around and climb scaffolding, because the voice actually is very physical. People think you can't move when you want to sing really well. It's actually the opposite. You use your weight, you use your body, and you can do. So when I work with singers, what helps me to work with them is I have a background in voice, not necessarily the same that they do, but we do get quite physical. And then when I work on productions that I'm directing with opera singers, I never hire dancers. I do the work with the singers on stage. They're the ones who will embody. I've had an opera where they're embodying dogs, or they're people, or they're completely the opposite of what their personality is. So I'm going to embark on something like that again in June. So it's really observing how those singers are. How do they stand? And instead of going like, oh, I wish they were more like this, or they're not, let's say somebody's not very flexible. How can I use the fact that they're not flexible? And how can I enhance this into hopefully they're well casted in their part, but I think it's a whole study of the person, of the interpreter, because you also want to put them in a real confident place so that they're willing. But most of the time, the projects I'm involved in, the singers just love to move and they just want to do things on stage. So it's not difficult to get them to those places.
That's cool. And you made me think of like Pink, the pop star, and how I've never seen her in concert, but apparently Pink.
Oh, Pink. Yeah, I've never seen her.
She's just like an acrobat while she's running around singing and just doing all sorts of crazy physical things.
If you think of children, this kind of screams of high voice or low voice, or it's all coming out of their bodies while they're doing. And, that's also, the approach of people in pain. They're not thinking about what sound they're making, and they might do chorded sound where you hear more than one note because it's really coming from deep, deep down in your body. But we lose that ability because we're, a lot of time in society, we're told to shut up or, oh, you don't sing the right note, so just mime the words if you're in a choir. I mean, we've heard all the stories when we would give workshops, people who were so shy about the voice. So it's a whole other, it's part of your body.
Yeah. Well, I'm just about ready to wrap up.
Yes.
But before I give details about the show again, is there anything else you'd like to say, Marie-Josée?
I just want to see a lot of people come to the show. That's all. I mean, that's what we do, It's something we want to share. So hopefully people will be curious to come and see what they get from it, how they absorb it, how they get affected by it, hopefully.
Wonderful. So that is Diptych, which is playing at the Odd Box here in Ottawa, and it's going to include Study for Quartet and Study for Soloists, both choreographed by Marie-Josée Chartier, who I've been speaking with today. And it's actually a double bill.
It's a double bill, yeah.
So there's also going to be a performance by Jacqueline Etier, which has been choreographed by Peggy Baker. All three of those works will be presented.
And it's a 7:30 performance.
7:30, and it's May 11th, 12th, and 13th. 2017. Hope to see you there.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Dirty Feet. I'm Allison Burns with a few thank yous. First to Paula Flalo and the No More Radio Network. Also to Mainline Theatre and Montreal Improv Theatre. And to all present and past team members who can be found on our website, dirtyfeetpodcast.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Dirty Feet Podcast and follow us on Twitter at Dirty Feet. Thank you for listening. Until next time. Stick around for a preview of our upcoming episode. Sarah, do you want to live forever?
This is actually a question that I've been terrified of my entire life. Like, I get very stressed. When I read this is the theme of your fundraiser, I was like, oh my God. Because no, I don't, and yes, I do.